Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are going to get started here in 30 seconds. We're going to give everyone a chance to log on. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are going to get started in just about 16 seconds here. If you have a moment to introduce yourself in the chat, we would love to get to know you. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Indiana Youth Institute's webinar. This is our 2025 State of the Child. My name is Joshua Long. I'm the Senior Educational Content Manager here at IYI. Thank you so much for joining us for today's presentation. We are grateful to have the chance to connect as a community of Indiana youth workers who remain committed to meeting the needs of our youth and children. For those who are not familiar with IYI, our mission is to improve the lives of all Indiana children by strengthening and connecting the people, organizations, and communities that are focused on kids and youth. Listed here, you can see our vision that drives the work we do for Indiana youth. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few pointers that will help you engage with today's webinar. For any technical support issues, use the chat feature to send a message and I will assist you. Use this feature to converse with the group as well. As a note, when you are conversing with the group, please make sure at the bottom of the chat window where it says to, that it says everyone to everyone and not to hosts and panelists. That way everyone can see your chat message. You will receive a copy of today's PowerPoint in an email follow-up to the presentation. We also encourage you to ask questions, so please use the Q&A feature for any that you may have, and we will get to as many as possible. Feel free to upvote any great questions to the top. Later today, you will receive an email with a link to complete an evaluation of this webinar. Please take a few minutes to let us know your thoughts about today's presentation, and if you don't receive an evaluation email, check your junk as it may have been directed there. Once you complete the evaluation, you will be redirected to your certificate of participation. Like all of IYI's webinars, today's webinar will be posted on our website if you'd like to revisit a portion later or share the opportunity to listen in with partners. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to our speakers for today, and we are going to start with our Vice President of Data and Communications, Ashley Haynes. Ashley.
Thank you, Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to pull up our State of the Child presentation for you all. So welcome and thank you for joining us for this is the 9th annual Indiana State of the Child webinar. I am Ashley Haynes, Vice President of Data and Communications at Indiana Youth Institute. And in just a couple of moments, I'll introduce you to my colleagues, Bree and Olga, who are our data and evaluation senior managers and manager for IYI. We hope that you take what you learn and hear about today and the folks that you're connecting with right now in the chat back to your communities and use this data to impact the kids that you see and work with every single day. But today is only the beginning. For the next 2 months, our IYI team will be traveling to counties all around the state to share local county-specific youth well-being data. We hope to see you there. Events are all currently listed at IYI.org if you want to check out which counties we are coming to this spring, and we'd love to join and meet you in person. As Josh mentioned, while you are joining us today, we would invite you to add any questions you have into the question box. We will have time to address some of them at the end of today's webinar. I can't promise we will get to all of them, but as Josh said, if you can use the upvote feature, if there is any questions that you see that you would also like to have answered. I'm going to start off this afternoon with an overview of the data from our 2025 Indiana Kids Count Data Book, which we just released this past Monday. And then I'm going to turn the majority of the presentation over to Bree and Olga to dive into our state level data for this year. At IYI, our mission is to improve the lives of all children by strengthening and connecting the people, organizations, and communities that are focused on youth. We do that by educating, equipping, and empowering youth workers through research, data, college and career readiness, professional support, and bringing together audiences like all of you today. There are over 1.5 million children living in Indiana. Our younger generations are more diverse than our adult population, and they're inheriting a world that is very different than the one most of us grew up in. Today, Indiana's young people face challenges we couldn't have imagined when we were growing up. It's our job as adults and youth workers and community leaders to prepare them for their future. And that's the purpose of IYI State of the Child. That's why these conversations are so important, to prepare Indiana's young people for what comes next. And to do that, we need to understand what they're going through today. And that's where a better understanding and knowledge of the data and using it for action comes in. For the past 31 years, IYI has released the Indiana Kids Count Data Book as the state affiliate for the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Kids Count Network. We're one of 53 across the country that create a data book type publication. The Kids Count Data Book serves as more than just a collection of numbers and statistics. It's a report card for us as adults. It challenges us to understand where we're making progress and where we must do better. But that means we need your help to make sense of the information and then act on it. So without further ado, here's our report card for adults. When it comes to issues affecting our youth, this year, Indiana ranks 15th in the country for economic well-being, 17th for education, 31st for family and community, and 32nd in the country for health. Our economic ranking was an improvement from last year, and overall, Indiana ranks 27th for youth well-being. There are positive trends in the data. Teen births are down, child poverty is at its lowest in over a decade, and youth employment is on the rise. But we also see some pressing concerns. Early childhood education enrollment remains low, food insecurity is increasing, and the lingering effects of the pandemic continue to impact mental health and learning. So let's get into the details. I'm going to turn our presentation over to Bree and Olga. They're going to dive into our 4 domains of data that IYI tracks in our Kids Count Data Book. We'll highlight where there's some good news in the data, where there's some areas of concern, and some opportunities for action for the future. After that, we'll dive into IYI's county dashboard. We'll leave some time at the end for your questions, so make sure you start to add those into our question box. And with that, I will turn it over to Bree and Olga.
Thank you so much, Ashley. As stated, I am Olga Volokhova, and I am excited to share this information with all of you today. As Ashley mentioned, one of the core domains by which we group our data is family and community. One of the indicators that we track with this domain is access to exercise opportunities. Whether you're an educator, health professional, or community leader, your work directly affects how young people engage in physical activity. According to the CDC, youth aged 6 to 17 should get at least 1 hour of physical activity every day. Access to safe and convenient workspaces like parks, trails, recreation centers, and gyms significantly impacts whether or not young people meet this guidance. The availability of these spaces can break down socioeconomic barriers, promote active lifestyles, and improve both physical and mental outcomes. Let's start with some positives. In 2022-2023, 23.2% of caregivers in Indiana reported their youth aged 6 to 17 engaged in at least 60 minutes of physical activity every day. That is higher than the national average of 19.5. While concerns about body weight and image exist, 21.6% of caregivers in Indiana reported that their child was somewhat or very much concerned about their body weight. This is lower than the national average of 24.3. However, there are still areas of concern. 76.5% of Hoosiers had adequate access to locations for physical activity. This is a slight decrease from 76.8% in 2022, and yet 7.5 percentage points below the national average. 15.4% of Indiana children did not live in a neighborhood with amenities such as parks, sidewalks, recreation centers, or libraries. This is higher than the national average of 10.4, and this limits opportunities for free and accessible physical activity. The number of students attending physical education or PE classes all 5 days of the school week has also declined from 24.8% in 2021 down to 22.4% in 2023. While Indiana has made progress in keeping youth active, there's still work to do in ensuring all kids have equal opportunities to exercise. The data tells us that while some students have access to great physical activity options, others are missing out due to geographic and economic barriers. Another indicator that we track in the family and community section is youth in foster care. The foster care system is designed to provide stability and safety. However, we know that disruptions in a child's environment can lead to challenges, including risks of juvenile delinquency and mental health struggles. The good news is that stable placements and supportive services can lead to better outcomes in education and overall well-being. Let's start with some of the progress that we've made. In 2024, 56.4% of children who exited foster care were reunited with their families. This is an increase from 53.6% in 2023. This means more families are receiving the support needed to safely bring their children home. The time it takes for children to achieve permanency has also decreased from 628 days in January 2023 to 579 days in January 2024. This is a step towards reducing uncertainty and giving children the stability they need sooner. Despite these positive trends, challenges still remain. In 2024, 18,371 youth experienced foster care. This marks a reversal in the decline that we have seen in prior years. Aging out remains a concern. Older teens without a permanent placement are at increased risk for homelessness, unemployment, and lack of higher education opportunities. Every child deserves a safe, stable, and nurturing environment. While we celebrate progress, we also must continue addressing challenges to ensure that every foster child in Indiana has a strong support system. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Bree for the next section, which is health.
Hey everyone, if I haven't met you already, my name is Bree, and like Olga, I am super excited to be here with you. I do want to apologize in advance. I have this cold, like many of us, that's just lingering, so I do have water. Bear with me. All right, so let's dive into the second domain of the Kids Count Data Book, health. Now, we care about success stories in Indiana, right? And one worth mentioning is the notable decline in substance use amongst our youth. Currently sitting at a 30-year low. That is huge, a 30-year low. In the past 2 years alone, we've seen Alcohol use, highlighted here in gray on the screen, dropped from 10.9% in 2022 to 9% in 2024. Now, binge drinking, which is defined as consuming 5 or more drinks in a row, has also declined. Vaping here in purple decreased from 9.4 in 2022 to 6.6 in 2024. Marijuana use, shown here in red, has also declined slightly from 6.4 in 2022 to 5.2 in 2024. And finally, cigarette smoking is down, with 1.5% of students reporting use compared to 1.9 in 2022, shown here in yellow. It's also worth noting that access to substances like alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana is becoming increasingly difficult for students. While overall use rates have decreased, many students still perceive these substances as relatively harmless. This perception gap presents a challenge in preventing future substance misuse and addiction. Substance use at an early age can lead to serious, long-term consequences, such as increased risk of addiction in adulthood, poor academic performance and higher dropout rates, increased likelihood of accidents, injuries, and legal issues, and then long-term health impacts, including cognitive and neurological effects. Increasing protective factors like family engagement, school connectedness, and positive peer influence can really help reverse these trends. Equally important is addressing risk factors like substance use among peers and community norms that tolerate substance use. Now, we are learning about the benefits of social connection in the lives of our youth, and that's certainly true when it comes to their mental health. Mental health is a critical aspect of a student's well-being, impacting their emotional, psychological, and social development. Starting with some encouraging trends from the most recent Indiana Youth Survey, rates of poor mental health are declining. In 2024, 29.9% of students reported feeling so sad or hopeless for 2 or more consecutive weeks that they stopped their usual activities, which, just to clarify here, is the clinical definition of depression. This was a decrease from 35.7 in 2022. Fewer students are considering suicide. 13.9% of students reported seriously considering attempting suicide in the past year, down from 17.2% in 2022. Fewer students are making suicide plans. 10.1% reported making a plan to attempt suicide, down from 12.8 in 2022. Now, before I go any further, I want to recognize that while these statistics are absolutely encouraging, I think we can all collectively agree that 1 in every 10 student respondents is still one too many. Further cementing that despite these improvements, challenges remain. Gender disparities persist. Female students were twice as likely as their male peers to report experiencing poor mental health across all 3 areas, consistent, as you can see here, with the previous years. 62% of LGBTQ youth in Indiana wanted mental health care, but they could not access the necessary services. And as you can see here on the screen, it's the highest rate across all neighboring states. What was the most common reason cited for forgoing necessary mental care? Well, thank you for asking. It was the fear of discussing their mental health concerns. Access to care remains a barrier. 59% of caregivers reported difficulties obtaining necessary mental health care for their child, a rate higher than both the national average of 56.1%, and again, as you can see here on the screen to my left, it's also the highest across all neighboring states. Mental Health America ranked Indiana the 16th highest state for the rate of children under 18 at risk for depression. These challenges highlight the need for continued focus on mental health resources and reducing barriers to access, because we know poor mental health can have lasting effects on youth, including difficulty developing coping and social skills, increased risk of substance use, poor decision-making and academic struggles, increased isolation, and future episodes of poor mental health. Because mental health intersects with other key health indicators, collaboration between families, schools, healthcare providers, and policymakers is vital. Early intervention and support can significantly improve outcomes for our youth.
Thank you, Bree. Economic well-being is our 3rd category of data. Let's talk about child food insecurity, because we know it can have serious consequences on children's health, development, and academic success. Studies show that children experiencing food insecurity are more likely to struggle in school, feel chronic health issues, and deal with family stress due to financial strain. Additionally, many families facing food insecurity rely on low-cost processed foods that lack the essential nutrients for child development. There have been some positive developments in addressing food insecurity in Indiana. Federal and local programs continue to provide essential support with approximately 70% of food insecure children eligible for federal nutrition assistance programs. Awareness and community-driven efforts to address food insecurity have increased, with more focus on providing fresh and nutritious options. Despite this progress, Indiana continues to face serious challenges in food insecurity. Nearly 2 in 10 children, about 18.2% in Indiana, struggled with food insecurity in 2022. This is compared to 12.9% in 2021, and overall, this is a 39.5% increase. An estimated 30% of food insecure children were ineligible for federal nutrition programs due to income limitations. This is consistent with national trends. 31.1% of households reported that while they could afford food, they lacked access to nutritious options, which is higher than the national rate of 27.4%. Child food insecurity is a critical issue that affects education, health, and overall well-being. While Indiana has made strides in addressing this issue, we need to continue to ensure that every child has access to nutritious meals. The next topic we're going to talk about is youth employment. And youth employment is an important factor in shaping the future workforce and economic landscape of Indiana. I'm going to highlight the latest data on youth employment to shed light on how we're supporting young people in developing job skills, increasing opportunities, and preparing them for adulthood. The good news is that Indiana is making strides in youth employment, with promising trends emerging. 39.4% of Indiana teens aged 16 to 19 were employed in 2023, surpassing the national rate of 33.3%. Among teens enrolled in school, 34.7% were employed. This is higher than the national rate of 30%. 10.4% of Indiana teens were neither in school nor employed. This is compared to the national rate of 11%. Despite these positive trends, there are still significant challenges. 9.2% of unemployed teens in Indiana had not graduated from high school. This is exceeding the national average of 7.3%. Furthermore, young people of color face disproportionately high employment rates, with rates exceeding 45% nationally as of July 2020. The pandemic had further exacerbated these employment gaps. These barriers emphasize the need for targeted efforts to provide access to jobs, skills training, and workforce development programs. Youth employment is more than just getting and earning a paycheck. It provides critical job-related skills that help young people transition into the workforce. It provides increased financial stability for both individuals and families. It provides social and professional connections that enhance career growth, and it's a path to reducing long-standing racial and economic disparities. By investing in our youth employment opportunities, we're preparing our young people to be part of a stronger workforce and a more resilient economy for the future. And I'll turn it back to my colleague, Bree.
All right, moving into education, the last domain you'll find in our data book. Starting with our youngest learners, research indicates that high quality early education programs provide significant benefits, such as a 40% lower likelihood of dropping out of school, long-term economic returns with every $1 invested generating over $8 in economic activity, and bridging gaps for children from low-income families, leading to an improved life outcome. Positive trends in India's early education landscape include participation in an On My Way pre-K program. It grew by 27.3%, reaching over 7,900 children in 2023. The Early Learning Access Index improved from 60.6 in 2021 to 63.8 excuse me, in 2024, reflecting steady progress and expanding access. Now, despite progress, Indiana faces ongoing challenges in early childhood education. 60%, I want to rephrase, 60% of 3 to 4-year-olds were not enrolled in preschool in 2023, below the national average of 54%. According to Early Learning Indiana, no county reached an access index score of 80, indicating that no area meets the threshold for adequate early learning availability. Rural counties are experiencing provider shortages, making access difficult for many families, and programs offering non-traditional hours have decreased from 28% in 2021 to 26% in 2024, limiting options for families working outside the typical hours. Early childhood education is a key driver of lifelong success. Investing in young learners today will equip them in their educational journey and future pathways. Speaking of future successes, let's look at our last set of data we're going to cover on Indiana's high school graduation rates, dropout rates, and college enrollment. Starting with some encouraging progress, Indiana's high school graduation rate has risen to 90.2% in 2024, up from 89% in 2023, which, as you can see here on the screen, is absolutely worth celebrating because it's the highest graduation rate in the last decade. That means more students are crossing the finish line and earning their diplomas on time. Additionally, fewer students are dropping out. The state's dropout rate decreased from 6.6% in 2023 to 5.8% in 2024, trending closer to pre-pandemic numbers. This decline means more students are staying in school and working towards their diplomas, which can have long-term benefits for both themselves and their communities. Now, while graduation and dropout rates have improved, challenges still remain. 26 of Indiana's 92 counties still have graduation rates below the state average. That means regional gaps persist, and some students face greater barriers to success. Racial disparities are present. The dropout rate among Black students remains the highest at 8.5, although I do want to point out that this actually decreased slightly from the previous year. Another concern is that while more students are graduating, fewer find meaning in their schoolwork. 33.8% of students in grades 7 to 12 reported that they seldom or never felt their schoolwork was meaningful, a troubling statistic that highlights engagement issues. When it comes to college enrollment, the numbers have stagnated. It's only 52.8% of Indiana's 2022 high school graduates enrolled in college. Sorry, it's a mouthful. A small increase from 52.9% the previous year. Additionally, students who graduated with a general diploma or core 40 degree are far less likely to attend college compared to those who are earning an academic honors diploma. These statistics matter because they directly impact the future of Hoosier youth, including their place in the workforce, economic mobility, and community well-being. Lower college enrollment rates may indicate affordability issues, lack of readiness, or a shift in career aspirations. It's important to ensure students understand all of their options, whether that's college or vocational training or other post-secondary pathways. Now, as we dive deeper into the broader well-being of children, we appreciate you taking the time to join us in exploring and better understanding the state of the child in Indiana. To make sure that we're respecting your time, we encourage you to add any questions as you may have them in the chat, and we'll spend a few minutes here in just a little bit answering them. While you're submitting those questions, I want to show you how to access this year's data book and county dashboard. There are two different ways that you can access our data book. There's a QR code here on the screen, and if your phone has enough space, all power to you, go ahead and scan that and it'll be on your phone. You can also visit IYI.org, and in the navigation bar under data, you'll see the Indiana Kids Count Data Book option, and that link will take you directly to the page where you can download a copy of the book. I personally love this option because you can easily click all the links that are included in the book, and you can also go to the end too, where all of our sources are. And if you're a data nerd like me and you want to dive any further, it's so easy. I love it. All right, to access our county dashboard, again, you'll start by heading over to ioi.org. Beautiful. Except this time under the navigation bar and under the data, you'll see county dashboard instead. Similar to last year, this year's data book, or dashboard is embedded directly into our website so you can interact with it. But keep in mind, you still have the option of opening the dashboard in another browser tab or window. Right. I'm gonna let this catch up a little bit. We're gonna navigate the dashboard together. Love it. This is what it will look like when it's embedded in our site. Again, you can still right click and put this in a tab if you want. Okay, so in the top right corner, you'll see 3 dots. Click those 3 dots, and at the very bottom of the options, you'll see a computer monitor. Click that last option to enter full screen. You just saw it, and trust me, this helps. The navigation between the pages of the dashboard, just like last year, can be found at the bottom, and you can navigate back and forth between pages. Our little wiggling call-out boxes that you see right there contain sources, years, and any definitions tied to the data itself. Being a county dashboard, of course, all 92 counties are included for each indicator, with the exception of 2 this year that are regional. To change counties, just go ahead and click the bar that says Indiana and select your county from the dropdown. At the top of each page, you'll see several boxes containing state level data. We did it this way so you can always see how your county is doing when compared to the state, and you don't have to switch back and forth between the dropdowns. This remains true for each page of the dashboard. And when you have some time to do a little digging on your own, I highly, highly encourage you to visit our dashboard and become familiar with all the features and the data that we've included this year. We are super proud of it. Beautiful. I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague, Ashley.
All right, thank you, Bree. Thank you, Olga. There are a couple of folks that have entered questions into the chat. I want to encourage you to continue to enter those to give you guys a few minutes to enter those. I'm actually going to live take you over to what we just shared a video on for the dashboard to give you just another look at this year's county dashboard. So as Bree mentioned, you can find the dashboard here under our data tab. She also mentioned that our Kids Count Data Book is available there as well. You can find that at the Kids Count Data Book drop-down link. When you enter the interactive 2025 dashboard for this year, as Bree said, it is available here embedded. You can also click this button that does open it up to that, that full screen window. A couple of features that Bree noted that I want to point out and reiterate again here is these little wiggly boxes that you see on the screen. They do drop down for every single data visual that you'll find. It includes the year of the data, the source of the data, which is incredibly helpful to understand where the data is coming from and what years we are looking at. If you're familiar with the data dashboard that we had last year, you will notice some updates in the indicators. For example, last year's dashboard included access grandparent caregiver data. This year we have access to exercise opportunities. These maps are incredibly helpful because you can compare right here by hovering over them how your county is doing in comparison to others. Bree mentioned, and we saw in the video, that there's a drop-down window that opens up here, and you can change that to filter by your county. So here's Allen County's data. You can change that to the county that you live and work in and take a look at how you're doing in comparison to your neighboring states. When you select that filter for the county, it does stay the same when you move from page to page on the dashboard, so you don't have to change it. When we get to the health page on the dashboard this year, there are 3 data visuals that actually represent 8 different data points related to health. So we'll see here in this first one, student reported mental health, you can use this drop down to change to look at depression, considering suicide, and planning suicide, and the data visual will change as well. For these health dashboards, this is why Bree mentioned that it's really helpful when you're looking at your own device. You can increase the size of the dashboard to a full screen. You'll notice that there is information here in the little wiggly box related to mental health and related to substance use that tells you which region your county is in according to the Indiana Youth Survey. So Xing out of the help box, you can then see here which region you are and connect that with the county that you live in. Our economic well-being data, again, we see a similar map to the other pages that you can hover over to see the percentage of youth employment in your county and compare that to your neighboring counties. And then on to our last slide for education. You'll see some data visuals related to the data that we just covered, as well as some additional ones like chronic absenteeism. All right, I hope that gave everyone a couple of minutes to enter questions into the chat. I am going to moderate our chat for us. I am going to ask Bree and Olga a couple of the questions that you guys have submitted in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we are able this afternoon. I do want to start with a couple of questions that came in that are a little bit more general. One being, how will the county data presentations be different than today's webinar? So in the county level presentations, we are going to dive into your county level data. So the data points that we just covered, like access to exercise opportunities, like graduation rate, we will be sharing what those data points look like in your particular county and in the counties that are nearby. At the local presentations, we are also going to have opportunities for you to interact and connect with others that are attending so that you can, one, make hopefully some new connections that you can use in your work with kids, also so that you can have conversations about how the data looks in your community and how you might work together to change those outcomes for kids. Another general question that came into the chat before we turn it over to some really specific data questions in here is there any way to know who in my region is doing work to address this data? That is a great reason to attend one of our local presentations because you're going to meet some folks that are doing that work in your community. Another way to engage with others in your region that are working to address the data is to join us at one of our youth worker cafes that our outreach and statewide engagement team hosts around the community, or the Fuel Up at networking events that we host as well. Great opportunities not only to learn from some expert speakers, but also to connect with others in your region that are doing similar work. All right, I'm gonna ask some of these questions that you have put in the chat of Bree. We will answer them to the best of our ability. I do want to reiterate and share, IYI, we are not primary data and research collectors. We are gathering data from our state agency partners, from federal sources, from other sources to bring all that information together for you in one place. So there may be some questions or some parts of the questions that we don't know the answer to that we may refer you to, for example, the Department of Education to learn more, but we'll do our best to answer the questions that have been asked. I'm going to start with a question around data and college and high school graduations. So the question is, does the data collected regarding high school graduates graduating with their diploma, is the data incorporating all graduates despite their graduation track? And how does the data for high school graduations include those who receive a certificate of completion?
Great question. So yes, it includes all different tracks. What it would include would be like the dropout or the fifth year senior or anybody that didn't go one way of completion, right? But yes, absolutely. And if you're curious, we will be updating the data center to include that. And what you'll see in there is the different tracks by graduation once we get to it.
Wonderful. Another question around education. Can you speak to the specific percentages of students that are proficient in reading across the state? For example, can that be broken down by demographics? And where is that data in our data book?
I'm sorry, I missed that question. What was it, Ashley?
Reading proficiency. What data do we have by reading proficiency, and how is that data broken down?
Yeah, so reading proficiency we have by third grade specifically, right? Did they ask about third grade? Or beautiful. Okay, so third grade reading proficiency we have it by race, by gender, and obviously by county. So again, that's another actually no, good news, right, Olga? It's in our data book. So
It
if you
is.
want all of that, except for the only thing that's not in our data book right now is gender. But if you're curious about gender, we can get you that too. But yeah, so great questions in our data book.
So in our data book, we break down the data to as small of a level as it is available to us. So you can find those. There's both detailed tables in our data book that break that down. And there's also charts and graphs that accompany that. And for our data book, for that in particular in the data book, there is iLearn and for language arts and math, and also iRead proficiency as well. Okay, I'm going to go to a question around youth employment. Is the data that's available, is there data that tells us the average wages for 16 to 19-year-olds or an average GPA? Is that data that we know is available?
Off the top of my head, okay, first of all, that is a beautiful idea. I wish that I know of. I don't know if that's available for our state specifically. Where we get our data from is the census. So I know that they don't have that offhand. Measure of America might. I can definitely dive into this a little further. That is a great idea, a beautiful thing, especially the GPA. That would be even, more telling. But off the top of my head, no, I don't know a source of that. I wish. Great idea though. I'm gonna write that down.
Wonderful. Okay. This next question, Bree, when we're talking about poverty status in our data book, how are we defining poverty status? There are a couple of indicators in our economic well-being section that are related to poverty. If you could just add some detail around what our source is for that.
Yeah, so we use, depending on, because some of these, right, they're main indicators or key indicators, one of our 60, that's how we define them. And we use so if you were looking at just children in poverty, we use the federal poverty level, so FPL to do that, and that's through the census. But if you're looking at things through, like if the source came through one of our data highlights, that's going to be National Survey of Children's Health. They also actually use federal FPL. But they have 4 different income buckets too. So there's a separate way of doing that. Did that help? Did that answer the question? We don't determine it. It's determined by either the census or National Survey of Children's Health. But both actually use FPL.
So I do want to keep encouraging you to add any questions into the chat box. I'm taking a scan through at some of the ones that just came in right here.
There's one by Emily it's a great question.
Yeah, if you can, go ahead and take that.
So Emily's question was, I'm curious about 2-parent homes versus 1-parent homes. Is there any data that is accessible to provide a fuller picture of children's home situations? So yes, and I'm really excited that you asked that. One, on our demographics, we talk about married or cohabitating parents, and then single mother, single father homes. So you can get the picture kind of roughly through that. But if you want to take that step further, in our median household income page, we included this year to have cost of living in there as Olga, is it a separate table? I forget. I think it is. Separate table. Yes. So what it will have is a 2-parent, 2-child, 1-parent, 2-child, 1-parent, 1-child cost of living, annual cost of living in there with the single mother, single father, married, cohabitating median household income. So I love that you asked that because we tried to address that a little bit more, especially from an economic standpoint.
And just as a note, and I'm sure this may be something that folks know, the data that we included in terms of two parent, one child, two parents, two children, we also have other ways of breaking that out. We just chose a few. So if you're wondering, like one parent, two children, that is something we can ask or get on request.
Depending,
Right. Still worth the ask.
always.
Can I answer another general question? So if you have some more data specific questions, please keep putting those in the chat. This question was, how can we use this data to advocate for the importance of our work or impact on these statistics? One of the items that we've added into our data book, we had it last year and we've updated and added some different topics for this year, is there are 8 data in action sections in the data book, and those include suggestions for how to use data at a local, state, and federal level to impact your work with kids. There are also examples of promising practices from great work being done in Indiana. Some are programs that are happening around the country that have some evidence-based research and work behind them to show that they have made an impact on that particular data indicator, such as chronic absenteeism is one that's in this year's data book. When you come to one of our local Save the Child presentations this spring, we'll also be talking as a group more about how you can use the data for your work to make an impact for kids. That was a really great question.
There's another one asked by Elizabeth Damon. I think that's how you say it. Okay, beautiful. So when information is separated by gender, where do trans children fall into said categories? Great question. I hear you. I would love to add that. Unfortunately, where we get our gender data currently is from the census. Now, I do want to preface this by saying the census is growing. They are growing not only their gender data, but they're also growing their race and ethnicity data too, to not just be Black or Asian or female or male, right? So they are growing. Unfortunately, in the data world, things just take a little bit more time for collection. Things tend to be really delayed, especially at that level. But they are growing. They recognize that. So stay tuned. I hope it comes soon. We do try to balance that out with data from like the Trevor Project as much as we can, when we can, where we can. But it would be a lot more helpful, right? If the census set the precedence and they're working towards that. So stay tuned. It's coming. We just don't have that access to that yet.
And I'll add some of the data, particularly around some of the mental health data. Some of that is also student reported data. So that some of the data that we have on our LGBTQ plus youth is also reported by the students, and that can absolutely depends on their comfort reporting that data. And that is also particularly we get a lot of questions around can you break down the mental health by my zip code or by my county in particular. The Indiana Youth Survey groups those by regions for privacy concerns, for data collection, and data reasons as well. So unfortunately, we cannot break those down to smaller levels, but it is really nice that you can look at region to region and understand where your county falls into that for some of that mental health data in particular.
Another question came in on how many dropouts have been classified as homeschool, and is this part of the reason that we have a higher graduation rate? That is a fascinating question that I don't think that I even thought to ask. We absolutely get data on the number of students that exit due to homeschooling, but we never asked for the cross data on that. I'm not even sure if that's possible because we just have never asked for it. I am fascinated that you brought that up, Mario. I definitely will look into that. That's very I don't necessarily think that, yeah, that is telling. I want to look into that actually. Stay tuned, Mario.
All right, Bree, here's a data source question. And again, this is just approximation to the best of your estimation. Approximately how many of our data sources are based on national federal data versus data that comes from our state agencies.
Oh gosh, okay. Including data highlights and things like that.
Just like go over overall.
I never actually thought about this. I would say maybe 60% it comes from state agencies. Versus national. That's what I'm gonna land on that.
So we rely on the Indiana Department of Education, the Department of Health, Department of Child Services,
And then
are
other
some of-
organizations like Prevention Insights for Indian Youth Survey and YRBS, things like that. So
and even partner organizations like Early Learning Indiana. So there are quite a few sprinkled out through every single indicator. There is data that we're getting from our state agencies that we are then supplementing or also using some national or federal sources. The census is our really big giant federal source that we're able to take that data and then look at it for Indiana. We still have a couple more minutes, say about 5 more minutes for questions. Bree, are there any that have come in through the chat that you want to touch on?
yeah, so Joe, that seems like a problem on my end on a technical side of the dashboard because you should not have there shouldn't be anything missing from the white Caucasian category in the dashboard. So maybe in the comments, if you can leave what county you're at, and I can look into that because that should not be happening. I will say in some if somebody can watch the chat on that. In some cases, if there's 0 for that category, it won't show up. So I don't think that's the case here with what they're asking. So there's that one. York County. Okay, let me write that down real quick. Thank you, Joe. Okay, let's see what else. I don't know too much about the opportunity youth session that was available. Maybe Corey or okay. Oh, Josh is chiming in on that one. And Pamela, we kind of had to, we didn't purposely want to cut anything back from previous versions of the data book. Sometimes some reports just were not updated, so that might be the case. I can look into that if you want to reach out to me directly. So if that might have been a report that just didn't get updated, and so we just didn't include it in the future uses, that's typically what tends to happen. But yeah, if you want to shoot me an email, I'll put my email in the chat. We can connect on that, and I can look into it further.
Pamela's question was around characteristics relating to maltreatment and level of detail that we might have available.
Yep, and book to find permanency when talking about foster youth aging. Yeah. Young adults. Rebecca, that's a whole that would be a DCS question because they are getting into that. That is a whole level of detail that I absolutely appreciate you for. That would be for that type of question, I would absolutely reach out to DCS. I wish I had that level of detail. We don't. So absolutely.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. Before I turn it back over to Josh, who's got some great follow-up information to share with you, I do want to put here on the screen, again, here is a link to our 2025 data book. You can scan that QR code. You can also follow at iyI.org in the drop down to navigate to the data book. And then we would just share that it'll be coming to you via email. If you've got a couple of minutes here this afternoon, we would really love your feedback on today's presentation. We are going to be doing versions of this with more local county data in March and April. And so any feedback that you have, we can use and incorporate into those presentations. And Josh, I will turn it back over to you.
Great. I am just going to replace your screen really quick. Share. Okay. Okay. So thank you so much to Ashley, Bree, and Olga for the wonderful presentation. I'll talk more about follow-up in a second, but changing gears as we close out, I'm going to talk briefly about a new IYI event that we have coming up. So join us for the 2025 National Summit on Youth Wellbeing, a virtual summit hosted by the Indiana Youth Institute that's all about tackling the big challenges facing today's youth. We're zeroing in on kids who often get overlooked, those from low-income families, communities of color, immigrant backgrounds, and kids who've been through challenges like trauma or neglect. This summit brings together expert speakers from across the country to share their knowledge and give you real-world strategies to make a difference. If you're passionate about creating spaces where all kids can thrive, this summit is for you. And so with that, there's a QR code that you'll also have in the PowerPoint follow-up. But then additionally, you can go to iyI.org /events to find the link there as well. Our webinar for next month is going to be on March 19th. It is called Empowering Emotional Resilience and Distress Tolerance in Youth. That is with Dr. Tamika Zapolsky. And so I have a description of that there. That you can read when you receive the PowerPoint presentation. All of IYI's upcoming events, in addition to the webinar and the National Summit on Youth Wellbeing, can be found at iyI.org/events. I just screenshot a very small sample of all the events that we have coming up. Many of them are virtual, some of them are in person. And so I strongly suggest to go to iyI.org/events and sign up for some of the professional education offerings that we have. Outside of iyI.org/events, one of the best ways to keep in touch with us is to sign up for our newsletter. So we have a QR code here, or you can go to iyI.org/newsletters, and that comes to your inbox every Friday. Additionally, I also wanted to just mention that there was a question in the chat about is there any way to know who in my region is doing work to address this data? And as far as IYI is concerned, the best thing that you can do to engage with us is to learn who your outreach manager is, reach out to them, and find out how to engage with them, whether that's through youth worker cafes or making connections. And so I'm just going to put a link in the chat to how you can find out who your outreach manager is. And then with that, I'm going to conclude. I sincerely thank you for being here with us today. We appreciate your impact, voice, and choice to learn and partner with IYI. Later today, you will receive an email that will include a copy of the presentation and a link to complete an evaluation of this webinar. Please take a few minutes to let us know what you thought about today's presentation, and upon completion, you will be redirected to your certificate of completion. If you don't receive the evaluation email, check your junk as it may have been directed there. And so with that, that concludes our presentation. And on behalf of Indiana's youth, thank you again for showing up today and every day for the children of Indiana.